Hello, and welcome to a Reader's History of Science Fiction. I'm Alex Howe, and this is Season 2, Episode 7, Catch-Up Episode Number 3, Marvel Movies. So this is kind of the low-hanging fruit of my pandemic-era media catch-up campaign. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of the most mainstream science fiction properties in history, but I still needed to catch up with them, so here we are. But this episode is not just about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. By now, Disney has consolidated most of Marvel's properties under the MCU umbrella, but there are still a few exceptions, and as of 2020, those exceptions still included the X-Men. So I will also be reviewing the 13th and final film of the former X-Men franchise, The New Mutants. I will not, however, be reviewing the Sony movies. Sony still owns the rights to the Spider-Man universe, even though they did a crossover in No Way Home. And Sony has put out 2 movies in that universe since the pandemic started. However, Morbius was so bad that people were pretending it was good on Twitter just for laughs, and I didn't see Let There Be Carnage just because I never saw the first Venom film. I also will not be reviewing the Disney Plus shows in this episode. This was an oversight on my part, I'll admit. I never watched the Netflix shows, and I stopped watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after Season 4. They started to bring in time travel, and I kinda lost interest. But none of them were ever that connected to the movie, so I didn't think they were that important. It was only with the recent announcement of Phase 5 and 6 that I realized just how integral to the movie continuity the Disney Plus series are, so I need to start catching up on those. So let's get to it. I'll start with The New Mutants, since that's the odd one out. This is, unusually, a standalone movie in the X-Men series. It's about 5 young mutants who find themselves trapped in a mysterious facility that they are told is a hospital designed to keep them from becoming a threat to themselves and others. However, things aren't necessarily as they appear, and the facility may not be as innocent as they first thought. And also, mysterious demons start haunting them. This movie did not do well with critics or audiences, but I actually quite liked it. It's interesting to see the X-Men universe take on a completely new set of characters unrelated to the big Professor X Magneto feud. Although they did do the same thing in the TV show The Gifted. The characters had good chemistry, and the storyline actually worked pretty well. It was a quieter, more psychological story than the big spectacles, but it had good development. It had good representation that didn't feel forced. And I felt invested in the story generally. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm going to have to disagree with the reviews and say it was all around good storytelling. I think my biggest criticism was that the portrayal of the devoutly Catholic girl Raine's faith felt kind of tone-deaf. You have her suffering under a priest who sounds more like a stereotypical hellfire preacher on one side, not even blinking at same-sex relationships on the other side. Need I remind you I said devout Catholic? And talking about her faith in a way that honestly sounded more sincere and natural than some Christian movies I've seen in the middle. I mean, I can understand why they wrote it the way they did for the plot, but it felt like a lot of weird parts that didn't quite fit together right. Anyway, this does seem likely to be the final dedicated X-Men film. And in fact, the Fox X-Men series, now owned by Disney of course, has pretty much closed itself out already. With Dark Phoenix, the James McAvoy prequels have more or less caught up in time with the original Patrick Stewart trilogy, and we learned in Logan that due to chemicals added to the food supply, no new mutants have been born since 2004. With Logan itself set in 2029, there's not a lot of room for more stories to be told. Ironically, The New Mutants has a fair bit of potential on that front, but I think it has also done a good job of bringing the story to a fitting close. Mutants, of course, are now slowly being worked into the MCU, so we'll still see them again. Now onto the MCU. Here, the pandemic era includes almost the entirety of Phase 4, with only Black Panther: Wakanda Forever still to come out this November. First, chronologically, we had Black Widow, which gave us the untold story of Natasha Romanoff as she finally took down the Red Room, which had turned her into an assassin and spy as a child, once and for all. And, it was fine. I felt there were definite notes of Deadpool 2 in there with how it was all about family, but I thought it worked very well with Nat's character as we saw it in Phase 3. It was a good story. But you know what would have been great? If it had come out in 2016 or 17 when it was actually set. A lot of fans complained that Black Widow got shafted by not getting her own movie until after she was dead, especially since they went ahead with Captain Marvel first, and I'm inclined to agree. Black Widow slots in really well in the continuity after Civil War, but Disney dropped the ball by not actually making it then. Next up, we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which is interesting in that the Ten Rings are actually integral to Iron Man's continuity in the comics, and were even mentioned way back in Iron Man 1. And of course, Iron Man is now dead. But in typical MCU fashion, they reimagined the story as something completely different, with good results. In this case, Shang-Chi's father, Zhu Wenwu, is a brutal warlord who discovered a piece of alien tech, the titular rings, 1,000 years ago. The rings gave him superhuman powers and also stopped him from aging, so he has used them to amass great power ever since. Shang-Chi's mother came from a mystical land where they used elemental magic, and she was the only person able to defeat Wenwu. But later she was killed by gangsters, and then a demonic force impersonated her to trick Wenwu into freeing it, and wow, this is a really complicated plot. I haven't even talked about Shang-Chi himself yet. You can see it for yourself. So this was a pretty good film. In fact, it's basically tied for the highest rated film in Phase 4. But honestly, I didn't think it was off the charts good. Also, there were a few dangling plot threads that felt out of place. But it was fun, and I'm interested to see where it goes. The next movie was the odd one out within the MCU, Eternals. This was actually pretty well done on a technical level, but the plot wasn't the best, and it felt completely out of place to the series as a whole. It really doesn't seem to have any connection with the rest of the MCU. I mean, except for the post-credits stinger. The Eternals are a group of 10 immortal, superpowered aliens who were sent to Earth by a celestial being in 5000 BC to defend humanity from the vicious alien predators known as deviants. But it turns out that the whole thing was a plot to bring about the birth of another celestial being. This will cause Earth to be destroyed as collateral damage, so they have to stop it. As I said, the plot of Eternals was so-so, but I'll tell you one thing it did really well. Amazingly well, in fact. It successfully introduced 10 all-new characters in one movie, in a way that made every single one of them memorable. That was an impressive feat. I contrast this with another Disney property, Rogue One, which had a decently engaging plot, but no joke, I could not remember a single character's name walking out of the theater. Someone should do a study about what Eternals did right and Rogue One did wrong, because seriously, it is night and day between them. Now we're getting to the real headline movies of Phase 4, starting with Spider-Man No Way Home, which was also the first Phase 4 movie I saw in theaters. I reviewed it on my blog. And I usually want to go easy on the spoilers, but I feel like I can't really talk about this one without spoilers. So if you somehow haven't seen it yet, but still want to, just skip ahead a minute or two. Okay, Spider-Man No Way Home has Peter Parker dealing with the fallout of having his identity revealed, not to mention being accused of murder, at the end of Far From Home. When he finally gets fed up with this, he goes to Doctor Strange and asks him to alter everyone's memory. But this goes wrong, leading to what I think is the first really big multi-studio crossover in superhero film history. Suddenly, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield both get dumped into the MCU, along with the lead villains of all 5 of their movies. And the 3 Spider-Men have to get them home before the entire multiverse is ripped apart. This was a really good movie, and you can read more in my review. The 3 Spider-Men's different personalities shine through, and their interactions were great. And I like how Tom Holland became Spider-Man 1, leading the charge because he had actually been on a team before. But with all that said, I was really dissatisfied with the ending. I dislike reset buttons in fiction. They feel cheap to me. And having Peter lose his best friends after their memory of him is erased is not just tragic, but also kind of sits wrong with me. Now, admittedly, this is taken straight from Marvel Comics, which did this at the end of their Civil War arc. But still, I feel like they could have done better. Structurally, I'm not convinced revealing Peter's identity was the right choice in the first place. Then this year, we were treated to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which I did see in theaters, but I didn't review because it was several weeks in. In this sequel, Doctor Strange has to stop Wanda Maximoff from stealing the power of a universe-hopping girl and potentially taking over the entire multiverse as the Scarlet Witch. And let me tell you, this goes to some dark and weird places, including a zombie Doctor Strange, a whole dimension of paint. Oh, and Wanda, a former hero, brutally killing an entire Avengers-level team in about 2 minutes. Wanda was kind of always too powerful a character to fit in with the rest of the MCU narratively, so it makes sense that they would want to write her out eventually. Granted, you could say the same about Captain Marvel, smashing clean through Thanos' ship, anyone? Anyway, it worked alright, but it was still middle of the pack. And also, I was really hoping to see more multiverse in the Multiverse of Madness, not spending most of their time in just one universe. Finally, we have the most recent entry in the MCU, Thor: Love and Thunder. And I do have a review of this one as well, in which Thor, the first MCU character to get a fourth dedicated movie, squares off against Gore the God Butcher, a man who was betrayed by his own god and now wants to kill all gods in the universe. And of course, Thor is aided by his ex-girlfriend Jane Foster, who, due to space magic shenanigans, is now able to wield the reassembled pieces of Mjolnir. And not a lot to say about this one. It was pretty good. They basically took the formula that made Ragnarok great and kept at it. Maybe it was a little over the top, but I liked it. So that's it. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour, but we're now caught up on the Marvel superhero movies since the start of this podcast. There were some solid offerings in this batch, and I'm excited to see what comes next. This has been A Reader's History of Science Fiction. This podcast is hosted by Libsyn and is available on all the major platforms, including Audible, Google, Apple, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and more. You can find me on YouTube at Science Meets Fiction, where I just put up a fun video about the longest word in the English language. Well, I had fun with it at least. I'm on Twitter at SciMeetsFiction, and my website is sciencemeetsfiction.com. Now, I need to make a recommendation for the episode, and I'm not sure. Several of these are good, but none of them seem to wildly stand out to me. I'm actually tempted to offer up the New Mutants as an unrecognized gem, but since I'm going against the grain on that, I'm not sure how it will go over. No Way Home did a really good job with the crossover, but the ending fell flat for me. If there's one film that I would want to watch again, it would be either that or Love and Thunder, although that could be influenced by how recently I've seen each one. But honestly, I don't see a lot of point in recommending something that you've probably already seen anyway, or made an informed decision not to see, that being the MCU. It made more sense with older works, but for contemporary movies it just seems redundant. And so, I'm going to buck the critics and recommend The New Mutants. Who knows, maybe you'll like it as much as I did. For the next episode, I'm going to do another classic full episode. And this time, I will be talking about the genre-bending category of techno thrillers. Thanks for listening.